Your comeback will shock everyone. And it should. Because everything that's happened in your life was never random, it was a setup for a return no one saw coming. The pain, the silence, the fallouts, the moments you thought were the end, none of it was wasted. What looked like a breakdown was, in fact, the beginning of a breakthrough. And not just any breakthrough, but one so deeply rooted in heaven's plan that when you rise, it will not just surprise people. It will humble them. It will make them question how they ever counted you out in the first place. You see, they thought you were done. They saw the seasons when you went quiet. When you were overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. When you withdrew, not because you were weak, but because you were bleeding in places no one could see. The world measured your silence as surrender. But heaven measured it as sanctification. While others assumed you were fading, God was forging something in you. Something sacred. Something unstoppable. That's why your comeback will carry weight, not the weight of trying to prove something, but the weight of undeniable glory. Let's be honest. You didn't survive what you survived just to return quietly. The fire you went through wasn't for show, it was for shaping. The tears you cried alone weren't just moments of pain, they were birthing something. You endured seasons of heartbreak, confusion, betrayal, and inner torment. You stood in places where it felt like everything in you was dying. But something deeper, something holy, refused to quit. And that's what this is about. You are not just a survivor. You are not just someone who made it through. You are a sign. A living, breathing testimony that what God ordains, He protects. What God calls, He equips. And what God refines, He reveals in power. That is why this next chapter in your life won't just feel different, it will look different. You're not coming back to be who you were. You're coming back to become who you were born to be. And that emergence, that transformation, will not be quiet. It will be glorious. People will wonder how you're still standing. They'll ask, how did they bounce back after all that? And the truth is, you didn't bounce back, you were brought back. Brought back by grace. Held together by mercy. Strengthened by fire. God was working in silence, rebuilding the pieces of your spirit while no one was looking. He saw the nights you couldn't sleep, the prayers you whispered through tears, the moments when getting out of bed was the bravest thing you did. He saw, and He stayed. And now, He's about to show the world what He was doing all along. You were never meant to stay down. That's why you couldn't stay broken, even when everything in you wanted to give up. That's why the thoughts that tried to bury you couldn't succeed. That's why your enemies will be confused. Because your comeback is not built on revenge, it's built on revelation. You now know who you are. And more importantly, you know whose you are. And that knowledge changes everything. You are chosen by God. Not as a concept. Not as a religious phrase. But as a fact. Chosen. Handpicked. Set apart. Your existence is not a result of coincidence, it is the manifestation of divine intention. Everything you've walked through was preparation for visibility. For voice. For authority. You carry something inside you that hell tried to silence. But it failed. And now, what's rising in you can't be explained by natural means. Because it's supernatural. It's prophetic. And it's right on time. And to those who've stood with this message, who've shared it, supported it, and helped carry this movement forward, I thank you from the depths of my heart. Your prayers, encouragement, and even your generous gifts through super thanks are part of something holy. You're not just helping a channel grow. You're helping light spread in a time of spiritual darkness. You're helping the forgotten remember they're chosen. But now, this moment is not just about listening, it's about stepping forward. There comes a time in every chosen one's life when the hiding ends and the revealing begins. And if this message has stirred something inside you, if your spirit says, "This is for me," then I want you to make a declaration. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not when it's easier. Now. Because the moment you decide to come into agreement with what God already said about you, the shift begins. Type 999 in the comments. Let it be your yes in the spirit. A public, visible act of faith that says, I'm not staying in the background anymore. I'm not shrinking to fit into spaces that no longer carry my name. I am chosen. I am rising. And my comeback, it's going to turn heads. This is more than a return. This is a resurrection. And what comes next will silence every lie, every fear, every doubt that tried to convince you otherwise. Get ready. Because when heaven reintroduces you, everyone will know. There has always been something about you that didn't quite blend in. Even when you tried to fit, when you dressed like everyone else, spoke like they spoke, pursued what they chased, something deep inside whispered that you were walking a different path. And for a long time, you didn't understand why. You just knew that normal never sat right with your soul. That comfort didn't call to you the way it did others. That there was an ache inside you for something more, something beyond the surface. That ache was not imagination. It was not pride. It was the early echo of a divine calling. You've always known you were different, not better, not above, but undeniably set apart. And the world around you may not have had language for it, but heaven did. That inner stirring, that invisible thread pulling you forward even in confusion, was God's voice beneath the noise. A calling too persistent to ignore, even when you tried. There were times when you buried it, tried to silence it, tried to live like everyone else. But it came back, again and again, quiet, unwavering, undeniable. Because calling doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention with noise. It waits in the silence, in the stillness. And when everything else fades, it remains. Think back. Maybe it was a dream, so vivid, so intense, that it stayed with you for years. Maybe it was a single conversation with someone who saw in you what you couldn't see in yourself. Or maybe it was a coincidence that shook you too deeply to call it random. These were not passing moments. They were signposts. Beacons. Quiet confirmations that you were being guided, even when you didn't realize it. And those moments left imprints, not just in your memory, but in your spirit. Because God doesn't call loudly. He calls intentionally. Every moment that seemed random was part of a meticulously designed path. The detours. The delays. The heartbreaks that forced you to pause. The mentors who appeared for a season. The doors that opened unexpectedly, and the ones that slammed shut without warning. None of it was coincidence. All of it was curriculum. Each experience was a lesson. Each meeting, a divine appointment. Each season, a step closer to destiny. And you've always felt it, haven't you? That you were walking through something sacred, though you couldn't explain it. That your life wasn't meant to be small, to be quiet, to be buried under the weight of mediocrity. That you were designed for something weightier. That the fire inside you wasn't stubbornness, it was signal. Signal from heaven that your existence holds meaning far beyond the eyes of those around you. The Bible affirms this in Jeremiah 29 verse 11, where God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope." This verse isn't vague encouragement, it's a heavenly blueprint. It means what you've been sensing isn't wishful thinking. It's confirmation. That hope burning inside you, even in your lowest moments, was placed there by God Himself. That future you can't shake is not an illusion. It's a promise. And that promise is not just about you. Because to be called is not just to be set apart. It's to be prepared. It's to be trusted with more. And if you were called, then you were also assigned. There is a reason your spirit has felt heavy in rooms that were spiritually shallow. There is a reason you couldn't stay comfortable in spaces that required you to shrink. There is a reason why even in your wandering, your heart kept turning back to purpose. God never left you to figure it out on your own. Even when you doubted, He confirmed. Even when you pulled away, he sent reminders. The path has been littered with guiding lights, just small enough to test your faith, but bright enough to remind you that you are not lost. The truth is, every time you felt out of place, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Every time you felt like you didn't belong, maybe you were being reminded that you were never meant to belong to systems built by man. You belong to something higher. A kingdom that doesn't play by the rules of this world. And now, you're starting to understand. You weren't just different, you were chosen. You weren't just wandering, you were being led. And that persistent feeling you could never quite silence. It was your spirit remembering what your mind forgot, that you were created for such a time as this. But now that you know, now that the call has been confirmed, it comes with weight. Because calling demands responsibility. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot unfeel what you now feel. You've been stirred awake not to spectate, but to step into purpose. The same God who called you from the beginning is now commissioning you to move. To rise. To return. Not just to live, but to lead. There comes a moment on every chosen one's journey when the silence becomes deafening. Not because God has gone quiet, but because the world no longer speaks your language. You look around and realize that what once felt familiar now feels foreign. You try to explain your heart to people who can't see beyond surface-level thinking. You talk about destiny, calling, deeper things, and they look at you like you're strange, too intense, too much. But it's not because you're broken. It's because you were never meant to belong to what was shallow. You felt this, haven't you? The strange sensation of being surrounded, yet alone. The experience of sitting in a room full of people and still feeling unseen. You've tried to blend in, to tone it down, to be like everyone else. But something in you always resisted. Something refused to settle. Because the truth is, you weren't made to blend in. You were made to be set apart. Being chosen comes with a weight, a spiritual gravity that pulls you toward purpose, even when everything around you seems to be pulling you into conformity. And that weight isn't light. It doesn't feel easy. In fact, it often feels unbearable. There are days when it seems like no one understands the battles you're fighting, not because they're dramatic, but because they're internal. The mental wrestling. The emotional tension. The spiritual pressure. And you carry it, not because you asked for it, but because heaven entrusted it to you. That's the thing about purpose, it rarely comes with applause. It comes with pressure. And it will cost you comfort, convenience, and sometimes even connection. But don't confuse isolation with abandonment. God isn't punishing you, He's preserving you. He's separating you so He can strengthen you for what others are not called to carry. You were never meant to walk the broad road. You were marked for the narrow path. Jesus Himself described it plainly in Matthew 7 verses 13 to 14, "Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." You are one of the few. And while that sounds honorable, let's be honest, it also feels heavy. Because the narrow path is not crowded. It's not lined with cheerleaders. It's often lonely. And that loneliness can wear on you, make you question whether you've misunderstood your call. But hear this clearly, the loneliness you felt is not proof you're off course. It's confirmation you're right on track. God never called you to popularity. He called you to purpose. And purpose doesn't seek validation from the crowd, it receives affirmation from obedience. So if you've been walking through seasons where your circle got smaller, your conversations got quieter, and your nights got longer, it may be because God has been drawing you into deeper dependence. Not because you failed, but because He trusts you to walk where others won't. Because let's be real, this calling is not for the faint of heart. It will make you question everything. It will demand the death of your ego, the stripping of your idols, the refining of your desires. But it will also awaken the warrior within you. The leader. The pioneer. The one who can walk in darkness and still carry light. The one who knows that silence is not weakness, but wisdom. That invisibility is not insignificance, but insulation. You felt misunderstood, but maybe that's because your language is heaven's, and the world isn't fluent in it. You felt the burden of having to move differently, think deeper, carry more, and at times it made you want to quit. But you didn't. And that right there is proof of the calling on your life. You didn't quit when it was uncomfortable. You didn't abandon the process when no one clapped for you. You didn't run from the fire, you let it shape you. Because deep down, you know, this isn't just about you. What makes you different is what makes you dangerous to the darkness. The weight you carry isn't punishment. It's evidence. It means you were made to withstand pressure most can't handle. To lead when others follow. To speak when others stay silent. To carry the burden of vision when others are still lost in distraction. So if you've ever wondered why you feel things deeper, why the road is steeper, why the journey feels lonelier, the answer is simple: you were never called to walk where the crowd goes. You were called to build a road others would follow. That's why the weight is heavy. Because the impact is eternal. And though the road is narrow, you're not walking it alone. Even when it feels like no one understands, heaven understands. God has not just called you, He's walking with you. Guiding your steps. Strengthening your resolve. Speaking in whispers when the noise gets too loud. And in that quiet strength, in that holy silence, something is forming in you. Not just survival, but power. Not just vision, but endurance. And that power is not loud, it's silent. But it will shake things when it's time. So keep walking. Keep trusting. The narrow road may feel lonely, but it leads to life. And what's being built inside you along that path will one day speak louder than any title, platform, or applause ever could. Everything you've been through had purpose. Let that settle for a moment, not as a comforting phrase, but as divine truth. The pain that tried to unravel you. The moments when betrayal cut deep, when the silence of unanswered prayers grew louder than hope, when it felt like everything was being taken from you, none of it was wasted. What seemed like chaos was a blueprint. What looked like loss was actually shaping. You were being built, not broken. And what builds you doesn't always feel like growth. Sometimes it feels like fire. But that's exactly what it was meant to be. You were forged, not formed. You were refined, not reduced. You didn't just go through the fire, you were transformed by it. The testing of your faith wasn't a delay or detour. It was design. It was the process by which your spirit gained weight, your discernment gained sharpness, and your endurance became unshakable. James 1 verse 3 says, "Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." And that perseverance isn't a passive quality, it's power under pressure. It's what keeps your feet moving when everything in you wants to stop. It's what holds your spirit together when your heart feels torn apart. And every time you held on, even with trembling hands, you were being strengthened for something far beyond what you could see. Sometimes God answers our prayers by building the person who can handle the promise. And that's what He was doing with you. You may have thought you were being delayed, but God was developing you. Because what's ahead of you is too weighty for a shallow foundation. Your future influence demands depth. Your authority in the Spirit requires tested strength. And strength is not birthed in comfort. It is born in the middle of hardship, when you are stripped of everything false and left only with what is eternal. You were being shaped in fire. Not because you were weak, but because you were chosen. And chosen vessels are never prepared like common ones. Your trials weren't evidence that God was punishing you. They were evidence that He was preparing you. Preparing you to carry something heavy. Preparing you to walk with a kind of clarity, compassion, and conviction that only comes through real suffering. Think about it. Every scar you carry, every moment that nearly broke you, it all became part of your preparation. Just like Joseph. Betrayed by his own brothers. Sold into slavery. falsely accused, forgotten in prison. Joseph endured years of injustice, isolation, and humiliation. And yet, every valley he walked through became a necessary step toward the platform God had prepared for him. Had Joseph skipped the prison, he wouldn't have had the character to handle the palace. Had he avoided the betrayal, he would have lacked the wisdom to govern with compassion. What felt like delay was destiny. And when the time was right, God elevated him to a position that saved not only a nation, but the very family that once rejected him. Your story carries the same prophetic pattern. No moment of pain in your life has been in vain. The betrayal didn't disqualify you. The injustice didn't cancel your calling. The breakdowns didn't remove your name from heaven's book. They refined you. They revealed your hunger for truth. They stripped you of self-reliance and taught you to lean into divine strength. Maybe you haven't realized it, but you've been becoming someone unstoppable. Every time you were overlooked, you learned to listen to the voice of God louder than the approval of people. Every time you were pushed aside, you learned to stand firm in identity, not popularity. Every moment that crushed your pride expanded your capacity. You've been in training for something greater, and the evidence is in the fact that you didn't give up. That you're still here. Still seeking. Still listening. Still willing to believe. So what if the pain wasn't a punishment, but a prophecy? What if everything you walked through wasn't an ending, but a beginning in disguise? What if the fire that tried to destroy you was actually God molding the kind of person he could trust with a comeback that carries glory? Because that's what this is. This season you're stepping into is not just recovery, it's redemption. But the road to it was never going to be easy. The weight of the anointing you carry required weight-bearing seasons. The kind of faith that moves mountains is never built in the shallows. It's built in the storms. And you've walked through enough of them to know now, God was with you all along. So here's the question, what if you started seeing your trials differently? What if you stopped asking, why did this happen to me, and started asking, what is this preparing me for? What if every tear was watering the soil for a harvest of impact? What if every loss was removing what can't come with you into the next level? You didn't survive the fire to remain the same. You survived it to emerge unrecognizable, not in appearance, but in strength, in maturity, in divine authority. This is where your comeback truly begins, not on the stage, but in the ashes. Not in the spotlight, but in the secret places where your character was refined. Not when they applaud you, but when heaven affirms you. And that affirmation has already come. Because through it all, the call never left. It waited. It watched. It whispered. And now, it's about to roar again. You've tried to walk away from it. You've tried to silence it. You've told yourself, maybe that wasn't God. Maybe that was just my imagination. There were moments when it all felt too big, too costly, too overwhelming, so you chose comfort over calling, quiet over chaos, and safety over surrender. And for a while, it felt easier. But not for long. Because the truth is, when you're chosen, you can't escape what's inside of you. It shows up in the quiet moments, when the world slows down and all that's left is you, your thoughts, and the quiet burning in your chest. It comes in dreams that feel too vivid to be forgotten. In memories you didn't ask for, but can't ignore. It interrupts your distractions, follows you into relationships, and echoes in your spirit when you try to live like nothing is sacred. That persistent pull. That's not guilt. That's not coincidence. That's calling. You've felt it. The invisible force that keeps drawing you back, even after seasons of failure, confusion, and denial. You've heard the voice that refuses to leave. Not to shame you, but to remind you. Remind you that there's something in you that was never meant to be average. Something heaven deposited. Something hell resisted. Something sacred that you didn't create, but were born carrying. It's not just a feeling. It's a spiritual fact. Romans 8 verse 30 says, "And those he predestined, he also called, those he called, he also justified, those he justified, he also glorified. There's no loophole in that divine sequence. No escape clause. No version where you get lost and disqualified forever. If God predestined you, he will call you. And if he called you, he will justify you. And if he justified you, glory is next. You weren't placed here by accident. You were launched into time with divine intent. You didn't ask to be chosen. You were born already marked. That's why the path never let you go. That's why the whispers of destiny still wake you up. That's why, even when you drifted, grace chased you. Because your life is part of a design too intricate for human logic and too holy for worldly plans. And maybe now, you're starting to understand, this isn't about religion. This isn't about rules or titles or traditions. It's about the blueprint on your soul, the one that existed before you knew your name. The one that keeps returning, no matter how far you run or how long you've been gone. You can numb it, deny it, distract yourself from it, but you can't erase it. Because this calling isn't just something God placed on you. It's who you are. You weren't called to be normal. You were built to carry weight. And that weight shows up in the ache to live with meaning. The burden to speak truth even when it costs you. The yearning to create, to build, to lead, to become. You can't explain it fully to others, because it wasn't given to them. It was given to you. And that's why running from it will never bring peace. Because when you run from your calling, you run from yourself. What if the very reason you're tired isn't because you're weak, but because you've been fighting what you were created to carry? What if the exhaustion isn't from the journey, but from the resistance? You've spent years questioning whether you're enough. Whether you missed it. Whether you've gone too far or failed too many times. But the call was never based on your perfection, it was rooted in God's purpose. He chose you knowing every detour you take. And yet, the call still stands. So now what? What happens when you stop running? What happens when you stop fighting what's already been written over your life? What if you allowed yourself to believe that the voice calling you back wasn't condemnation, but confirmation? What if you saw that holy pull not as pressure, but as promise? The time has come to stop hiding. To stop pretending you don't feel it. To stop shrinking to fit into lives that don't reflect your soul. Because the truth is, it's not going away. It's not weakening. It's not fading. It's getting louder, not because it's chasing you, but because you're getting closer. And now, all that's left is one decision: will you answer? This is the moment where everything shifts, not because your life suddenly becomes easier, but because your heart finally says yes. Not just to the idea of purpose, but to the reality of who you were always meant to be. The call never left you. It waited. It whispered. And now, it invites you to stop surviving and start transforming. There's a place in every chosen one's journey where things go quiet. Where life feels stripped bare, and nothing looks like what was promised. No voices cheering. No signs pointing forward. No clarity in sight. Just silence. Dryness. Emptiness. It's the wilderness, and it's not a mistake. The wilderness is not where God abandons you. It's where He forms you. If you've ever felt like your prayers were echoing into a void, if you've ever walked through seasons where no one understood you, where everything around you seemed to collapse, congratulations. You're not lost. You're in divine training. This dry season, this invisible fire you've been walking through, it's not random. It's holy. And it has a name. It's called the wilderness. It's not a punishment. It's preparation. Just like the desert is scorching by day and freezing by night, your spiritual wilderness has stretched you in every direction. Emotionally exhausted, spiritually tested, mentally drained, you've been pushed beyond your limits. But here's the paradox: it's in that pressure that purpose begins to take shape. The wilderness strips away everything superficial. In that place, there's no performance, no pretense, no distractions. Just you and God, and whatever He's trying to grow in you. And that kind of transformation doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in stillness. In the fire of loneliness. In the pressure of invisibility. In the daily surrender of not knowing what's next. That's why God didn't take the Israelites straight from Egypt to the Promised Land. He brought them to the wilderness. Not to destroy them, but to deliver them from themselves. Exodus 16 verse 4 says, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you." In a place with no natural provision, God supernaturally sustained them. He didn't need the desert to show them their surroundings. He needed it to reveal what was in their hearts. And maybe that's exactly what's been happening in your life. You've wondered why things were stripped from you. Why certain people walked away. Why some dreams felt delayed. Why the path ahead disappeared. But what if God was removing the scaffolding that was never meant to carry your calling? What if the silence wasn't rejection, but redirection? What if the barrenness wasn't the absence of his hand, but the proof that he was working beneath the surface? Because in the wilderness, miracles don't come in the form of applause. They come as manna, just enough for today. Not excess, but sufficiency. Not luxury, but survival. And that survival? It's proof you're being strengthened in the unseen. James 1 verse 3 reminds us, "The testing of your faith produces perseverance." Perseverance isn't just endurance, it's power in process. In the desert, your faith is forged. Your mindset shifts. Your spirit matures. You begin to move not because you see, but because you trust. Not because it makes sense, but because you know. You start to recognize that God didn't remove the wilderness, He joined you in it. So let me ask you, have you been walking through a wilderness season? Have you felt forgotten, unseen, left behind? Have you questioned why God feels silent when you need Him most? If so, hear this, His silence is not His absence. His distance is not neglect. He's refining you. Developing something within you that could never be born on mountaintops. Purpose doesn't form in public, it's chiseled in private. You're not being punished. You're being positioned. Because when God allows you to go through the wilderness, it's because He intends to trust you with something sacred. Something eternal. Something weighty. He's building the kind of strength that doesn't collapse when critics come. The kind of faith that doesn't waver when provision looks impossible. The kind of vision that doesn't fade when the road ahead disappears. What you gain in the wilderness will sustain you in the promised land. That's why the desert matters. Because if you skip it, you miss what God meant to strengthen. Every day you kept walking. Every night you cried and didn't quit. Every step you took without applause, without confirmation, without answers, heaven took notice. The wilderness didn't break you. It built you. It taught you how to hear God in whispers. How to trust Him without evidence. How to follow when the path disappears. And more than anything, it taught you who you really are, not the version others see, but the one God shaped in fire. So don't despise the desert. Don't curse the silence. What felt like divine distance was actually divine design. The wilderness didn't kill your purpose, it carved it. You weren't just surviving. You were being stretched, stripped, and strengthened for the destiny ahead. Because the truth is, no wilderness, no clarity. No crushing, no oil. No isolation, no revelation. The very thing you prayed for, purpose, power, calling, could not be released until something in you died, and something greater was born. And now, that new version of you is emerging, not soft, not shallow, but solid. The wilderness has done its work. The desert was never meant to be your grave. It was meant to be your gateway. What felt like the end was only the beginning in disguise. In human logic, the desert represents depletion, failure, abandonment. It's where dreams dry up and promises feel forgotten. But in the language of heaven, the desert is sacred ground. It's where God doesn't bury your calling, He builds it. It's where everything that no longer serves you falls away, so what's eternal can rise. It's where Jesus himself was led by the Spirit, not to be punished, but to be prepared. 40 days in the wilderness didn't mark his fall. It marked the start of his divine mission. And if it was true for him, it's true for you. Your desert season wasn't a detour. It was initiation. Every time you walked forward with no map, every day you chose to get up when everything in you screamed to stay down, those were sacred steps. You didn't need applause, approval, or obvious signs. You moved by faith, not by sight. You prayed when nothing changed. You hoped when nothing improved. You believed when no one else stood with you. And that, chosen one, is a miracle heaven does not overlook. You may not have realized it, but every step you took in silence was a declaration, I have not given up. Every breath you drew in weariness was a whisper to the heavens, I still believe. Every moment you didn't quit, even when quitting felt reasonable, was a triumph not measured by this world, but echoed in eternity. That's why the desert never defined your death. It revealed your depth. And in that barren land, God didn't leave you empty. He left you clues. Little oases in the heat of the journey. Maybe it was a friend who spoke the right words at the right time. Maybe it was a dream that reignited your hope. Maybe it was a quiet moment of peace when everything else was chaos. Those weren't coincidences. Those were divine breadcrumbs. Evidence that even in the wilderness, God was present. Not shouting. Not shaking the earth. But whispering, sustaining, watching. And those whispers sustained you more than any miracle could have. You see, victory doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes, it comes in the form of survival. Of one more day. One more prayer. One more ounce of faith. You didn't need to move mountains to prove you were progressing. You just had to keep walking. And you did. And that's where the shift begins. Because now, you can look back and see it, the desert was never empty. It was full of transformation. Every dry place built roots that run deep. Every silent night trained your ears to hear God without noise. Every struggle stretched your spirit until your soul could hold more truth, more power, more clarity than before. You were not withering in the desert. You were deepening. Just like Moses, who met God in the wilderness and became the deliverer of a nation. Just like David, who fled to the caves and was forged into a king. Just like Jesus, who walked out of his desert not defeated, but anointed. The desert has never been a sentence of death for God's chosen. It's always been a place of resurrection. So if you've been wondering whether this dry season meant you were abandoned, hear this, you weren't abandoned. You were hidden. God wasn't punishing you. He was preserving you. He was allowing the noise to die down so his voice could rise within. The silence wasn't your curse. It was the container that held your commissioning. And maybe you thought you were being forgotten. Maybe it felt like nothing was moving, nothing was shifting, nothing was becoming. But what if the very stillness you feared was the soil God used to plant something deeper in you? What if the desert didn't delay you? It protected you. What if it didn't strip you? It stripped away everything that couldn't go with you. Because now, you're no longer fragile. You're fortified. You're not a shell of who you once were, you're a vessel of who you were always meant to become. You're stronger. Sharper. Steadier. You've been through fire, and you didn't burn. You've been through silence, and your spirit still sings. You've walked through spiritual drought, and yet living water now flows through you. So let this truth echo loud in your heart, the desert is not your end. It's your beginning. The moment you thought you were dying was actually the moment God was birthing something new. Not in the comfort of certainty, but in the wilderness of surrender. And now, you stand at the edge, not of despair, but of destiny. You've fallen. More than once. Maybe so many times that you've lost count. Maybe to the outside world, it looked like weakness, like inconsistency, like proof that you weren't ready. But heaven saw something different. Heaven saw a warrior in training. A chosen one being refined. Proverbs 24 verse 16 declares, "Though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again." This isn't just encouragement, it's a revelation. Even the righteous fall. Even the ones God handpicked stumble. What makes them different is not how many times they hit the ground, but that they always get back up. You were never promised a path free from failure. What you were promised is that no fall would ever be final. Failure, in the world's eyes, is a mark of defeat. But in the kingdom of God, failure is a classroom. A fire. A forge. It is not the place where you're cast aside, it's the place where you are shaped. You're not being punished. You're being perfected. That painful moment when everything collapsed, when you thought you blew it beyond redemption, when you doubted your calling, your identity, even your faith, that wasn't the end. That was the breaking point that became your building ground. What if the worst thing that happened to you wasn't your downfall, but your doorway? Every wound you carry, every bruise on your spirit, every scar etched into your story, they are not blemishes. They are badges. They are the marks of someone who dared to walk the narrow path. Someone who took hits, who got bloodied in battle, but refused to stay down. You didn't just survive that pain. You learned through it. And that, beloved, is power. Because the truth is, no warrior is born ready. They are built in the arena. Formed in fire. Hardened in trial. And yes, often humbled in defeat. You don't become strong by avoiding hardship. You become strong by rising again, and again, and again, until the act of standing becomes your second nature. Your failures have not disqualified you. They've qualified you. Every fall you've taken has taught you something nothing else could. You've learned patience in the waiting. You've learned humility in the breaking. You've learned discernment in the aftermath. You've discovered which voices matter, and which ones don't. You've learned how to hear God in the silence, how to recognize Him when everything else is screaming. These are not small lessons. These are the foundations of unshakable faith. And let's not pretend it was easy. There were moments you questioned everything. There were times you were tempted to quit for good. There were days when the shame of your stumble was louder than the memory of your calling. But even in those low points, maybe especially in those low points, God never let go. His hand was still on you. His eyes were still on your future. And now, here you are, still standing. Do you see what that means? You've walked through storms that would have drowned others. You've been hit with blows meant to destroy you. You've carried the weight of guilt, disappointment, and rejection, and still, something in you kept rising. That's not just resilience. That's divine evidence. Because when you're chosen, you don't rise on your own. You rise because grace lifts you. You rise because the Spirit strengthens you. You rise because destiny won't let you rot in defeat. And now, the scars you once tried to hide. They're telling your story. Not a story of failure, but of redemption. Not a story of shame, but of survival. They're not proof that you lost. They're proof that you fought. And that fight is why your comeback will carry more power than your first breakthrough ever could. So yes, you've fallen. But you've also risen. And every time you stood back up, darkness trembled. Every time you refused to stay down, you made it harder for the enemy to ever touch you again. And every time you wiped your tears, steadied your breath, and took one more step forward, you announced to heaven and hell alike, I am still here. I am not finished. I am not defeated. You are not the person you were before the fall. You're wiser now. Sharper. Your faith has been tested, and it endured. Your courage has been challenged, and it grew. Your identity has been shaken, and yet it remained. So, don't resent the fall. Don't hide from the lessons. Don't bury the bruises. Because all of it, every misstep, every heartbreak, every moment of weakness, was part of the preparation. The fall was never a failure. It was a function of God's plan. A step in the dance of redemption. And now, you're not just rising. You're being elevated. The next season of your life isn't about repair, it's about reigniting the fire that was forged in failure and refined by grace. You're not defined by the moment you broke. You're defined by the moment you got back up. There comes a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable to others, when everything begins to make sense. It doesn't arrive with thunder or applause. It comes in stillness. In a whisper. In that sacred space where your spirit finally exhales and sees with clarity what your eyes had only glimpsed before. This is the moment of inner awakening, the moment when the pieces of your journey, every fall, every silence, every unanswered prayer, suddenly align like a divine mosaic, revealing that nothing was ever wasted. The chaos was not random. The pain was not pointless. It was all preparation. You may not even remember exactly when it happened, but you'll remember how it felt. Like someone flipped on a light inside your soul. Like something ancient within you finally came alive again. This wasn't something someone else gave you. It wasn't a sermon, a book, or a voice on the outside. It was something God Himself placed inside you, waiting for the right time to ignite. And now, it's burning. Not in fear. But in truth. In knowing. In sacred certainty. For years, you may have looked at yourself through the lens of what happened to you, through the betrayals, the delays, the dismissals. You measured your worth by what you lost, by how others saw you, by the wounds you carried. But in this awakening, something shifts. You no longer see your reflection in the mirror of past pain. You see yourself in the mirror of divine intention. You realize that everything they overlooked was exactly what God had chosen. The talents they doubted, the ideas you buried, the voice you silenced to make others comfortable, these were never flaws. They were seeds of destiny. And now, they're breaking through the soil. This awakening is not just insight, it's activation. Something within you has been triggered by divine design. You begin to carry yourself differently. You speak with more authority, not because you suddenly became stronger, but because you finally remembered who you've been all along. The battles didn't steal your identity, they revealed it. You've stopped asking for permission to exist in your fullness. You've stopped explaining why you think differently, why you feel deeply, why you can't settle for surface things. Because now, you understand, your uniqueness is not a flaw. It's your fingerprint from God. What changes next isn't just how you feel. It's how you move. How you choose. How you walk into rooms. You no longer look for validation, you bring light. You no longer shrink in the presence of confusion, you anchor in truth. This light inside of you becomes the compass, the fire, the force that guides your every step. And the beautiful paradox is this: the light you now carry was born in the darkest moments. You found it not because life was easy, but because the fire didn't consume you, it refined you. And here's what makes it even more powerful: this awakening isn't just for you. This light isn't meant to glow quietly in a corner. It's meant to lead. To guide. To awaken others. There are people in your life, perhaps even watching you now, who are still stuck in the silence you once knew. They are still doubting themselves the way you once did. They are still mistaking survival for destiny. But when they see you rise, when they see your clarity, when they feel the conviction in your presence, they will begin to awaken too. Because light spreads. And your light, chosen one, is contagious. You are no longer a seeker, you are a signal. You're not just trying to find the path, you're becoming a path for others. That is the calling within the awakening, to carry what you found into a world that forgot what truth sounds like. So don't underestimate what has just happened inside of you. This is not a minor realization. This is the beginning of your return. And it will not be a quiet one. It will be the kind of return that makes people pause. It will be the kind of transformation that can't be explained, only witnessed. You're not going back to who you were. That version of you was too small for where you're going. Because once the light turns on, you can't go back to the dark. Let it be known, the awakening within you is the beginning of a rise that will shock everyone who thought they knew your story. What they saw before was the struggling version, the silenced version, the survival version. But what's coming next is the activated, anointed, unapologetic version of you. The one who was always meant to lead. The one who was forged in fire. The one who no longer doubts the power inside. You are not who you were. You are becoming who God always knew you would be. And this sacred ignition within, is only the beginning. There comes a moment in every divine journey where the mission must be redefined. Not because you failed it, but because you outgrew it. After all the valleys you've walked through, after the awakening that shifted your soul, something within you knows, you are not the same. And if you are no longer the same, the mission that once fit you like a second skin may now feel too tight, too shallow, too tied to a version of yourself that no longer exists. This isn't rebellion. It's revelation. When you've grown through pain, matured through silence, and awakened in the fire, there's a new clarity that rises within. You begin to see that what once motivated you no longer ignites your spirit. The dreams that once felt urgent now feel incomplete. The goals you chased in one season may not carry the same eternal weight in the season you're stepping into now. It's not failure, it's alignment. You're not abandoning purpose. You're returning to its purest form. But to walk into this newly defined mission, you must let go. And letting go, as simple as it sounds, is one of the most difficult acts of obedience. Because you're not just releasing an idea. You're releasing versions of yourself. You're laying down old expectations, those of others and your own. You're breaking free from identities you wore just to survive. The titles that made you feel accepted, the roles you thought you had to play to be useful, these things may have served you, but they can't lead you anymore. God is calling you higher, and you cannot rise while gripping what was meant to stay behind. Letting go hurts because it feels like loss. But in heaven's perspective, it is the very condition for flight. The Apostle Paul understood this divine detachment when he wrote, "Forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize." Philippians 3 verses 13 to 14. Paul was not suggesting amnesia, he was advocating freedom. He knew that destiny could not be anchored to the past. He wasn't diminishing the past, but he refused to be defined by it. And so must you. This process is not a denial of who you were, it's an elevation of who you were always meant to be. Redefining your mission doesn't mean the previous chapters were in vain. It means those chapters were foundational. They were necessary. But they were never meant to be the whole book. You are turning the page not out of impulse, but out of conviction. You've outgrown the shallows. It's time to go deeper. Some may not understand. They'll see you shift, evolve, detach, and they may question your direction. They'll say you've changed. And you have. Because encounter changes you. Fire changes you. Awakening changes you. But when others doubt, remember this, their confusion is not your responsibility. You were not created to be understood, you were created to be obedient. Obedience will sometimes look like disruption. But God never called you to fit in. He called you to rise. And the higher you go, the lighter you must become. So, you shed the unnecessary. You release the weights. You strip away what once felt noble but now feels like noise. And as you do, something beautiful happens, you begin to feel the winds of heaven under your wings. You begin to soar. Not in arrogance, but in alignment. Not in performance, but in purpose. This is the emergence of the new you, the one who has let go of the old mission to embrace the higher calling. This isn't just a comeback. It's a complete reintroduction. A sacred unveiling of the version of you that hell hoped would never surface. The version of you that doesn't need to prove, defend, or explain, but simply walks forward with clarity, boldness, and divine permission. The mission hasn't died. It has evolved. And so have you. So let this be the declaration of your new season: I'm not going back. I'm not shrinking. I'm not clinging to what was. I'm rising into what is. Let go and rise. A triumphant return doesn't happen by accident. It's not the result of luck or a fortunate coincidence, it's the outcome of intentional, layered preparation. The kind of comeback that shocks the world is not birthed in comfort or chaos, but in quiet, sacred alignment. Before it is seen by others, it is forged in the unseen, where the mind is renewed, the soul is healed, the spirit is anchored, and the body is fortified. Everything you've been through wasn't just survival training. It was the sharpening, the chiseling, the refining for this exact moment, your return. And now, it is time to prepare with purpose. It begins with your mind. This is the battlefield where most victories are either won or lost. A chosen one cannot walk into destiny with a mind that still entertains defeat, doubt, or confusion. You must rebuild your mental framework until it reflects who you truly are, someone appointed, anointed, and capable. Visualization is not just a technique, it's an act of faith. You must see yourself stepping into the room, owning your authority, walking in purpose, and radiating clarity. When your mind rehearses the vision, your spirit begins to move in agreement. Mental preparation is not optional. It is the foundation of divine confidence. Then, there's your emotional terrain. You cannot carry old pain into a new season and expect it not to sabotage what's ahead. This is the moment where you stop suppressing and start addressing. You sit with the fears. You acknowledge the disappointments. You look into the places that still ache and ask God to heal what you never let Him touch. Emotional alignment requires radical honesty. It means forgiving what hurt you, even when there's no apology. It means letting go of the version of yourself that had to survive, so the version of you that's ready to thrive can finally breathe. Unhealed emotions are silent saboteurs. But healed emotions? They become fuel for compassion, empathy, and strength. But none of it holds without spiritual realignment. You've made it this far, not just because you were strong, but because God carried you. And now more than ever, your connection to Him must be deepened. This is the time to return to the altar, not just with requests, but with surrender. In the quiet, He will whisper instructions. In His presence, He will rebuild your endurance. The more aligned you are with heaven, the clearer your earthly assignment becomes. Your spirit must lead the way. Because without spiritual clarity, all the preparation in the world still leaves you exposed. And what about your physical body? Don't overlook it. Your body is the vessel through which your mission will manifest. If it is neglected, so will your stamina. Your comeback requires energy, resilience, and alertness. Begin to treat your body not as an afterthought, but as a sacred partner in your calling. Nourish it. Move it. Let it rest when needed. This is not vanity, it's stewardship. A strengthened body supports a focused mind and a willing heart. When your physical strength aligns with your spiritual fire, you become unstoppable. But even this internal work must be met with practical preparation. Faith without structure is frustration waiting to happen. It's time to write the vision. Outline your goals. Reassess your resources. Realign your calendar. Ask the tough questions: what needs to go? What needs to grow? What are the next steps? Who is meant to walk with you, and who is no longer aligned with your calling? Don't just prepare your heart, prepare your house. Don't just feel ready, be ready. Destiny respects preparation. And when all of this begins to align, mind, emotions, spirit, body, and strategy, you won't have to force your return. It will unfold naturally, powerfully, and undeniably. You will not stumble back into visibility. You will rise into it, whole, focused, and divinely equipped. Your alignment will be louder than any announcement. People won't be impressed because you returned. They'll be stunned by how you returned, anchored, luminous, and unshakable. This is more than just a season of reappearance. This is a season of divine realignment. And the most powerful part? No one may see the preparation, but everyone will witness the impact. Because when God has rebuilt you in private, He will reveal you in power. So prepare. Meticulously. Boldly. With faith. Because when you rise this time, it won't be just for you. It will be a sign to the world that when God calls someone back, He never sends them empty, He sends them fully equipped to shake the ground beneath them. Your return is not a maybe. It's not a wish. It's a certainty, because you have prepared. And the world is about to see what God has been perfecting in silence. Your comeback is not just about you. It never was. What you've survived, what you've learned, and who you've become was never meant to remain a private victory. Because when a chosen one rises again, the world around them cannot remain unchanged. Your return is a wave of transformation, like a stone dropped into still water. Your renewed presence will create ripples that reach far beyond what you can immediately see. From the moment you decide to stand up, from the moment you reclaim your voice and start walking in your divine identity, something shifts, not only in you, but in the atmosphere around you. People begin to take notice. Those who once saw you at your lowest will begin to question how you're rising higher than before. Your actions, your decisions, your posture, it all speaks now. And it speaks louder than any words ever could. You are no longer just a person who went through pain, you are the evidence that it is possible to come through the fire refined, not reduced. This is why your return is not just personal, it's prophetic. Your journey becomes a living message. Your transformation becomes a sermon in motion. You are now the embodiment of resilience. The same people who once doubted you, who once whispered about your downfall, will now witness what God has built in silence. You become the living proof that faith works, that endurance matters, and that God's timing is never off. And more than that, your comeback will awaken others. Some people are barely holding on. Some are buried under shame, fear, or regret. But when they see you, when they see someone who looked finished, now standing in purpose, now moving with strength, now shining with light, they will begin to believe again. You become the mirror that reminds them of who they could be. You become a light in their darkness, simply by being who you were called to be. You will start to notice people looking to you not because you're perfect, but because you carry the scars of victory. You'll become a natural leader, not because you asked for it, but because people trust what's been tested. They won't ask for your resume, they'll ask how you kept going. They won't need to see credentials, they'll feel the power of your authenticity. In your rise, you become a safe space for others to begin theirs. And the impact won't stop at personal relationships. Your decisions, your presence, your consistency, will begin to shape your environment. You will raise the standard for what faith, resilience, and purpose look like in real life. You'll create a new culture, a culture of perseverance, authenticity, and hope. A place where others start to believe they can get up, too. Not because life is easy, but because now they've seen someone who didn't give up when it was hard. Your return will challenge people to dream again. It will stir something in those who had buried their calling, those who were quietly giving up on themselves. They will hear something in your story that sounds like their story, and suddenly, they'll begin to move again. You will have lit a spark that they didn't know was still alive. This is what it means to be chosen. Not just to survive, but to return stronger so others can rise with you. This is how legacy begins. Not with loud announcements, but with quiet breakthroughs that echo across generations. Your life becomes a blueprint for healing, for growth, for God's miraculous restoration. And the best part? It doesn't end with you. It multiplies. So don't think of your comeback as a private reward. It is a public release. It is God putting His glory on display through you, not so others can envy, but so they can awaken. Your restoration becomes a movement. And long after the moment passes, the memory of your resilience will remain. The inspiration you sparked will continue. The people you lifted up will go on to lift others. You're not just coming back. You're coming back transformed. And in that transformation, You will carry others with you, into healing, into freedom, into destiny. Your rise will not only restore your own life. It will resurrect the hope of many. This is what happens when a chosen one returns. Now that you've walked through the fire, crossed the wilderness, risen from the ashes of what was meant to destroy you, hear this: your comeback is not a coincidence. It is not the result of chance or mere determination. It is the unfolding of a divine decree spoken over your life long before the pain ever began. And now, at this pivotal moment, as everything you've survived begins to align into clarity, there's a truth that must echo through your spirit: the best is yet to come. This isn't just a motivational phrase. It's a prophetic declaration, forged in fire, affirmed in faith, and sealed by the promises of God. Everything up to this point has been preparation. Every closed door, every tear, every silent night was not in vain, it was part of a divine process. You are stepping into the fulfillment of what God has always intended for you. And no, it's not too late. You haven't missed it. In fact, you're right on time. Psalm 37 verse 24 reminds us with sacred assurance: though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. That verse isn't poetic comfort, it's spiritual truth. Your setbacks never had the power to disqualify you, because God's hand was beneath you the entire time. Even when you felt abandoned, even when your strength gave out, he was still holding you up. The fall did not define you. The rising does. So now, as you prepare to walk boldly into your new beginning, it's time to respond, not passively, but actively. Faith is not just something you carry in your heart, it's something you demonstrate with your life. That's why we invite you now to make a declaration, not just in your thoughts, but in your actions. Comment below, speak it out loud. Say it with boldness: I'm coming back, and I am not who I was. Share your testimony, even if it's just one sentence of faith. Let heaven and hell know, you're not hiding anymore. If this message has spoken to you, consider donating or giving a super thanks. This mission is about more than words, it's about awakening the chosen ones around the world. Your generosity helps push this light into places where darkness has ruled for too long. Share this message with someone you know is on the edge of giving up. Be the messenger of breakthrough in someone else's life. And don't forget to subscribe, not just to this channel, but to the divine assignment on your life. Stay connected to the movement that reminds you who you are. Because this moment, is not the end. It is the beginning of the most extraordinary chapter yet. And we're not speaking in faith alone, we're speaking in alignment with what heaven has already declared. There is a shift happening. And you, chosen one, are part of it. May God's favor overwhelm you. May his power strengthen you. May his voice guide every step you take. And above all, may you walk not in fear, but in boldness, into the future he has prepared for you. Not because of who you used to be, but because of who you are now becoming. Never forget, you are chosen. Not by men, not by culture, not by accident, but by the living God himself. And because you are chosen, you are covered. You are called. You are protected. And you are appointed for such a time as this. So walk forward, not just as a survivor, but as a vessel of revival. Your breakthrough is not coming, it is already moving toward you. It's happening. And nothing can stop it. The comeback you've been waiting for is unfolding, not just for your sake, but for the sake of everyone who will be transformed by your rising. Stand tall. Speak boldly. Move with conviction. Because this comeback isn't just personal, it's prophetic. The world won't see it coming. But heaven has seen it all along. Let this closing be your launching. And let the world prepare, because your comeback will shock everyone.